ARE Podcast, episode number 12.
Welcome to the ARE Podcast, where it's all about encouraging and inspiring you today so you can fulfill your dream of becoming a licensed architect tomorrow. And now your host, he prefers milk chocolate over dark chocolate, David Doucette.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the ARE Podcast. We're getting a couple of we're knocking these out now. We're on a roll here, Mr. Eric Corey Freed, our co-host.
Yeah, 2. That's a knockout.
2 for 2015. We are on a roll. By the way, do you prefer milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
Milk.
Do you really?
Yeah. What are you sending me?
I would have thought dark chocolate. You seem like a dark chocolate guy. Majority of the population, I think, likes dark chocolate.
First of all, I don't know if that's at all true, but
it is true.
I like all chocolate. I actually even like white chocolate.
I like white chocolate,
which is technically not chocolate.
Dark chocolate it's too bitter for me.
This wasn't in the show notes. Is this?
No, it wasn't in the show. It's just playing off the intro. But I know how you like to get down to business, so why don't we do that?
Unlike you, I'm a serious guy.
Yes, you're very serious. So our new segment, which is now becoming a habit, because I think if you do it 2 times, or is it actually 3 times, it becomes a habit? Is that what they say?
I thought it was 21 times. If you do it 21 times, it's a habit.
Is that what it is?
You got to do something like work. If you're going to work out, you got to do it 21 times in a row to actually for it to stick.
Oh, okay. I thought 3 times was a habit. Well, there you go. So that brings us to our first top. Well, actually, we should talk about what the show is going to be about so people can decide whether they want to listen or not any further. So we
have a guest in the office.
Yes, we have a guest in the office. You're right.
And he's gone.
Oh, behind me.
Yeah, in the studio.
Oh, I thought the guest being you, because we're going to talk about what you do today.
It looked like a drunk midget just came in the studio.
So we're going to talk all about the International Living Future Institute and the Living Building Challenge today, and that ties in with your dream job and the fact you're now living in Portland. So we're going to talk all about that today. But before we do that, let's talk about our quick NCARB news. And what's our quick NCARB news today? I'm going to throw this one to you.
Which thing are you referring? Are you talking about that we're listed as one of their top 8 podcasts of the year?
No, that was last week's episode.
That was last week.
Thanks for the plug, though. This is the top 14 blog posts of 2014. Right. So NCARB put out this a few days ago, where they have their top 14 blog posts that have appeared on their website, but not all of them written by NCARB. Some of them were contributed by others, by Michael at Young Architect, who's a friend of the show. He wrote their number 10 on their list, Why I Studied for the ARE Every Day. So we can check that out. But there's a lot of good information there. One is IDP streamline and overhaul frequently asked questions, which we know IDP is undergoing potentially some changes, which we can talk about another show. How the ARE is scored, 10 best Instagram accounts for architects, best blogs for architecture students and interns, and also the 8 best podcasts for architects. We talked about that last week. So that made it into their top 14. So that's good for us. And what you need to know about licensure upon graduation. So there's 14 great blog posts. We'll link to them in the show notes. I encourage you to check those out because we always want to keep up with NCARB, because we have to establish our council record. if we want to get licensed, and they administer the ARE, so we need to keep up with what they're doing so we know what's going on.
I will say that NCARB does seem to be going through a transition right now. When I talked to the NCARB folks at the Greenbuild conference in New Orleans this year, I basically just wanted to talk to them about what's the new exam like, 5.0, and how does it work, and when's it coming out, and what's the timeline. It seems like they're undergoing a lot of transition. Maybe in part is it's that they realized that their audience numbers were lacking, that the people taking the exam had been dropping, as they said to me. And maybe in part it's just they realized that for the 21st century they needed to kind of get with the times.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a combination of both of those, and I think for so many of us, doing things today it's just different than it was doing it even a few years ago. So NCARB has finally realized that, and 5.0 is coming down the pipeline in a couple of years, and I think they've realized that they need to adapt to how younger architects or architects to be, how are they dealing with things, and what are they looking for, and they publish quite a few articles, and their website is a great resource of information, because they're always putting stuff out. And go ahead.
They had told me that the timeline for 5.0 it is 2 years out, but then they were going to allow candidates to choose which exam version they want to take, 4 or 5.0, until 2018.
Right. So there's going to be a transition period when they'll both be offered, right, and candidates can then choose. But the bottom line is it's the beginning of 2015. And me personally, if you're listening to this podcast, there's no reason to even worry about 5.0, because you should just get this knocked out now.
Yeah, do it now. What are you waiting for?
Exactly. Get it done in 2015. I took 7 years to get this done. I am not a model of how to do it, but you and Aubrey both did it in like 16 weeks or something crazy like that.
Yeah, Aubrey did it in 5 months. I did it. I just booked him every other week, so I did it. I had 9 exams back then, and I did it in 18 weeks. Oh,
so you had to clarify that you beat Aubrey by 2 weeks. Is that
no?
I had,
but you and I were older, so we had more exams. They had 9 back then instead of 7. So it's back in my day, we had 9 exams.
So you wanted to make the point, just to be clear, you took 9 exams.
I took 9
in 18 weeks.
Crushed all of them
in 18 weeks, and Aubrey did her 7 in 20 weeks. So you just wanted to be clear. She's a slacker. Exactly.
And I had a beard. I didn't shave or anything or shower, so I had like a beard down to my knees by the time I was done, and no friends, no social life. But I got it done.
Yeah, you got it done. No, it's very commendable, and it took me 7 years. So I think it seems to be, if somebody is on it, a month per exam seems to generally be, I think, about what people are doing. Maybe structural might be 2 months of preparation, but I think getting it done within a year is certainly an achievable goal. Obviously, it takes discipline and focus and all of that good stuff. But the point is, don't worry. If you're listening now, don't worry about 5.0.
Well, I like the idea of the all-in scenario, where it's like, okay, when I did it, and I talked about this before, I know, but when I did it, I said, I'm not going to have a life for these 18 weeks. I'm not going to go to movies. I'm not going to do anything except, work and study. That's all I did. And it was nice because it was done. When those movie stars get into shape for movies, right?
Right.
Well, that's kind of, what's his name from Guardians of the Galaxy suddenly got all ripped and buffed, and he basically said, yeah, I had no life for 6 months, where I had a trainer 4 times a day and ate nothing but parsley, and it's kind of like that, just kind of getting the mindset of visualizing that goal and doing it. So I like the idea of just getting it all done at once, but 1 a month I think has a nice vibe to it, and a nice feel to it.
Getting buff for the ARE. That's what we should title this episode.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about today's show topic. And I got to go to my show notes to make sure I get the name right of what you're doing up there in Portland. So you in September, you took a job, which is a bit of a dream job for you. So this is at the International Living Future Institute, correct?
Yes.
And what the big thing that they are known for now is the Living Building Challenge. Like that's their big thing, right?
Yeah, that's what most people have not heard of the Living Future Institute, but have heard of Living Building Challenge. That's usually my experience.
Exactly.
Because they look at me kind of puzzled. And I go, well, Living Building Challenge? And they go, oh, yeah. I go, that's us. That's our thing.
And you guys are a nonprofit.
We are a nonprofit / think tank / nonprofit.
And you were living in Palm Springs. Of course, you were in San Francisco, moved to Palm Springs, and then this opportunity for essentially a real job came up over the summer.
Right.
I've never known you to have a real job.
I haven't had a real job in like 17, 18 years. So it was a very awkward first week because I didn't know you were supposed to wear pants to the office. There were things like that I didn't realize that I had to learn very quickly.
Wear shoes and socks.
I had to wear shoes. Right. I couldn't go to movies in the middle of the day. Like they had all these rules there.
But this is really a dream job for you and sort of combines a lot of what you've done up to this point. Obviously, you're one of the green building gurus. You speak around the country on green building topics. All of those skills come into play of what you're doing now. So the first thing let's talk about is what actually is the Living Building Challenge. Then we'll get into your role there. But what is the Living Building Challenge?
In short, the Living Building Challenge is a green building certification. That's the easiest way to say it.
Because we don't have enough of those.
No, but you've probably heard of LEED, right?
Right. We all know LEED.
We all know LEED, and I've certainly worked on plenty of those, right? LEED is great, but it advocates for buildings to be less bad. It basically says if this is the energy performance of a typical building, let's improve that energy efficiency, but let's be less bad. If we're putting toxins in, let's use less of them, and that's fine. But it doesn't solve the problem. The analogy is that if you're headed off a cliff at 60 miles an hour, getting people to slow down to 25 is nice. It buys you some time, but it doesn't really solve the problem. You really need to turn the wheel. You really need to go in a different direction. And so Living Building Challenge is complements LEED in that way, in that if a typical LEED building, basic gold certified, silver, gold, and platinum are here, that a living building would be up here. It is the most stringent green building system in the world because it calls for buildings that are living and regenerative, buildings that produce more energy than they consume, that recycle at least a portion of their own water, that avoid all toxins at all costs. So it's hard. That's why we call it a challenge. It's not called the Living Building free for all. It's the Living Building Challenge because it's difficult.
In why do clients want to sign up? Because obviously this is voluntary, as is LEED is voluntary, but as we're seeing in some building codes, especially here in California with the Green Building Code, a lot of the Green Building Codes are coming up to sort of LEED standards.
Right.
So there's state laws and regulations that are making codes more stringent, wanting them to be more energy efficient, more almost aligned with LEED, and the future of LEED, and to see what happens there remains to be determined. But the Living Building Challenge is way above that, completely voluntary. Why does somebody want to sign up for it?
The reason somebody would want to sign up for it is usually because they own the building and care about the occupants. You have to realize the biggest expense in a building, and this is true for almost any type of building, the biggest expense is actually the people in it, right? So why wouldn't you want to build a building that is healthy and uplifting and beautiful? So it's not a rating system. LEED is a rating system. In LEED, you can pick and choose which points you get. And there are some points called prerequisites, which you have to do. But for the most part, you can pick and choose which ones you do. And so every LEED project I've ever worked on, and there's been a few dozen that I've done now. I think I'm up to 40. The first meeting is, okay, what are the easy points, right? That's a typical lead conversation. And we knock out the easy points first. And then, okay, what are the medium points and what are the hard points? With Living Building Challenge, you can't do that. There are 20 credits, but they're all required. They're all prerequisites. We call them imperatives. You can't pick and choose which ones. You have to do all 20 in order to meet the challenge. And they're broken into 7 categories, and we call the categories petals, like petals of a flower.
Right.
And they're pretty obvious petals, right? There's one called place, which is our site petal, water, energy, health, and happiness. But we also have 2 other petals that are kind of interesting. Equity, so the fairness of it, and beauty. Because we realize that what's the point of building the greenest building in the world if it's hideously ugly? So it also has to be beautiful in some way. And so these 7 categories really make a profound difference. That's why I tell people it's as much a philosophy as it is a rating system, because we're setting the bar very high, deliberately so. And when it first came out in 2008, people told us that it was impossible, that it couldn't be done. And now 235 buildings are going through the challenge. So it's not only can it be done, but it's setting precedent for everybody else. So having hundreds of buildings now go through it is really made quite a difference.
And okay, so it is a rating system, but there's the philosophy behind it, or the alongside of it.
Yeah, there's no tiers. You can't get certified silver, gold, or platinum. You either meet the challenge or you don't.
And it's kind of like my experience with LEED is I think most people refer to it or think of it as just a rating system. Right. I don't think the USGBC hasn't really done a great job at communicating that there's a philosophy attached to it. And that's what you guys have done and do and will continue to do. It's really this philosophy about it and the benefits of doing it.
Well, if you look at a lot of the criticism that LEED has received and USGBC have received over the years, in part it's because they have made these concessions, right? They have had these partnerships with the American Chemistry Council and with the Vinyl Institute and with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, SFI. They have been trying to appeal to everybody, and that serves a purpose, and it really has a place in the world. But there's also this place of saying, you know what? If every building went LEED Platinum tomorrow, it still wouldn't solve the problem. I mean, it'd be great.
Right.
But in truth, we'd still be emitting a lot of carbon. We'd still be living in very unwalkable cities. Living Building Challenge says, well, wait, let's step back and ask the question, where do buildings need to be? How do we actually get to a point of sustainable? And in our case, actually regenerative, where we can actually fix some of the damage that we've done. So in the Living Building Challenge, for example, we ask you to produce 105% of your energy, because nature doesn't run on a zero-sum game. Nature is always producing a little surplus. So we want you to produce a little bit more, 5% more. So these buildings are not just net zero energy; they're net positive energy. So
if we have the philosophy in place of we want a green building, the client that's what I'm thinking of now. Obviously, to become now, do you call it certified?
Yes.
Okay, so you're certified Living Building Challenge. What's is that the certification?
Yeah.
Why is a client do I'm a building owner? Why do I want to do that? Is this for existing buildings or new buildings?
Both.
Both.
You can do it for either. It's the system's designed for all different scales too. I think most people think of them as kind of large buildings, but in truth, individual houses have gone for the certification and everything in between. We have our first zoo going for it.
Do you really?
It's a weird. That's a weird building type, but it's pretty cool.
But what is the motivation as a building owner? Let's just say, Joe developer, right? He wants a better building, but it sounds like Joe developer has to be a little more special than your average developer to want to do the Living Building Challenge. It's going to be more expensive up front just because.
Well, because we're using a lot of systems that are untested. In fact, a lot of these buildings are using systems that aren't even approved by the building code. Using gray water to flush the toilets, for instance, is a challenge. One of the things that we do as an institute is we we help people with advocacy, so that way they can help pave the way for people to have living buildings in their region. One of the most famous buildings that's Living Building Challenge certified is the Bullitt Center in Seattle. It's a very cool looking building. Miller and Hull designed it. They're a great firm. And the building has it's 6 stories tall, and it's got this very wide solar roof. So the roof itself kind of extends over the sidewalk and over the building. It almost looks like a hat. And if you look at that building, it was the first one in Seattle to use waterless toilets. It was the first one to use the airspace over the sidewalk to collect solar and to collect rainwater. It's got a lot of firsts in it. But now that it's done, other people in Seattle are using that building as a precedent setting and saying, well, you let the Bullitt Center do it, so let us do it. And so there's this kind of side benefit of if you're pioneering and paving the way, you can help other people. But yeah, Joe Developer probably won't want to be a pioneer. Joe Developer might want to get on the bandwagon, but probably won't want to be a pioneer. And also because the whole model for development is slightly flawed, right? Joe Developer wants to build a building as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible. That's good business for a developer. But if you look at the people that have done it, the hundreds of people that have done Living Building Challenge, they're people that own the building, right? It's universities, it's institutions, it's companies where they're occupying the building. So they benefit from having zero energy bill. They benefit from having a healthy workplace. They benefit from collecting their own rainwater and reusing it.
Well,
they're getting the ROI much faster.
They're smart enough. First off, in the show notes, make sure you put the link to the Bullitt Center on there. That would be good.
Oh, I will.
But these institutions and these individuals who accept the Living Building Challenge, much like any client interested, I guess, in green building per se, they understand the longer term benefits, and they understand, our impact or the impact that buildings have. They understand the longer term impacts, and the longer term sort of returns. So they're also smart enough to realize, they'll save money in the long term, as well as resources, and just be a more responsible building owner.
Not potentially, they will. I mean, if you think about it, we build buildings ideally to last 100 years, but at the very least 50, right?
Right.
The real impact of any building, whether it's a house or whether it's an office building or whether it's a giant university facility, the real impact of any building is in the life of the building, not in the 2 years they took building it. It's right. In all the operations, right? All that electricity, all that maintenance, all that effort, and all those people that pass through the building. That's what we should be focusing on. Unfortunately, we've really run a very developer-centric model for construction, where they want to build it as quickly as possible, make it as profitable as quickly as possible, and flip it. And this flipper mentality has been part of the problem.
Right.
That's not to say developers aren't using Living Building Challenge. It's just that these are usually pretty special developers who have enough foresight to realize they can't continue building these toxic, unhealthy boxes.
One of the things you mentioned about the Bullitt Center is that it was one of the first, and now other people in Seattle want to do it, and they have to ask, for concessions, I guess, meaning rules and regulations, building department, that kind of stuff, because some of that stuff obviously it's just not regulated by code, or not allowed by code.
Yeah, the building codes are really interesting because most were written around the 50s and 60s, and they haven't really revised them. They add to them all the time,
right?
Every few years, right? You've all seen that. No matter what city you're in, they always issue a new version of the code, but they're always adding to it. There's no mechanism to kind of step back and say, hey, let's rewrite this thing from scratch. I mean, why would they, right?
Right.
So what you have is you have a building code that's really great for wood, really great for steel, and really great for concrete, and really great for traditional systems. And if you want to do anything outside of wood, steel, or concrete, or anything outside of a traditional system, it often takes education. So waterless urinals, waterless toilets, rainwater catchment, net positive energy. All these things are not. There's no mechanism in the code to handle these things, and so you have different cities trying at different levels of understanding to do it. So in Seattle, they had never done it before. They said, we've never done it before. We don't know enough about the systems, and so it took convincing. But now that it's done, Well, now they're like, yeah, go for it. I mean, it's amazing how one building is enough to really change the mindset of an entire building department.
That is interesting, and as a result, as you're seeing now, more buildings like the Bullitt Center are being built there, and the building department is more now familiar because now there's this living model, and not even model, an actual building, but this living actual building that went through the building department process that now people can see it and understand it,
Right.
And it only makes sense that okay, they're going to approve other projects like that.
The other main difference between LEED and Living Building Challenge, and this is a pronounced one, is LEED is based on what you model the building for, what you expect the building to do performance-wise. We do these very complex energy models, and we do fundamental commissioning at the beginning for LEED buildings. With Living Building Challenge, it's based on actual data. So you can't get certified until you have at least a year's worth of data submitted after the building's been opened. We want to know that the solar systems are producing at least 105% of the energy. We want to know exactly how much water are you saving. So this idea of using real data instead of model data is it's subtle, but it makes all the difference.
Which I think is important and interesting, and one of the reasons is because we want to make sure these systems are working the way they were designed to work. Exactly. But at the most basic level, we want to make sure they were installed correctly. I read this story last year. You might have heard about this one. It was somewhere in LAUSD in one of the school systems that had a bunch of solar panels installed. But this went on, I guess, for a few years. Do you know the story?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell it? Because you probably know it better than I do.
Well, this has been an issue with a lot of LEED buildings, is because they were awarded LEED certification based on the model, and when they actually went back and turned out that none of the systems were working as efficiently as they initially modeled, for a number of reasons. One is, how did they install it correctly? Two, did they operate the building? I think of it as a bit of a car. Your car runs better when you have it tuned up, and when you have it tuned up regularly, it runs even better. And buildings require the same thing. You can't just put these systems in and then forget them. They need constant observation and maintenance. Tune-ups, really, to keep working as efficiently. And with the LAUSD thing, there's a lot of stories there. There's one where they installed the solar panels facing the wrong way. That was kind of a nice.
The one I heard, they just didn't plug it in.
And then that one is, so they have this step-down converter, and they just never connected it.
They just never connected it, right?
So the panels were on the roof, and I don't know the details of it, of the names and people involved, but they just forgot.
And no one realized it.
And if they had actual performance data, if they were measuring that, they would know. There's an old saying: if it gets measured, it gets managed.
Right.
Right. It's an old saying, right? That's why we thrive on data. So with these buildings, you're building cutting edge, and in some cases bleeding edge buildings. You need to have a monitoring system. Most of these buildings have dashboards, and they're collecting so much data now, and the data is being analyzed, and we're able to see down to the minute, if something happened. At the Bullitt Center, for instance, you can tell when a cloud passes over the building because you see the solar productivity like dips. And this is Seattle, so it's a cloudy place. But you can get that minute-to-minute performance data now and do something about it.
So the Living Building Challenge, which the International Living Future Institute, they're based in Seattle, right? So it would make sense that this would start in Seattle because that's where they're based.
Well, we're based in Portland and Seattle, and we also have an office in Vancouver. We're very Cascadia region bound. That's where we started. In fact, we're still the U.S. Green Building Council chapter, the Cascadia chapter for the Pacific Northwest. So we are a USGBC chapter, believe it or not. And so yeah, it makes sense that it's in Seattle. But we have these buildings in 18 countries now. One of my favorite ones just opened. It's called the Brock Environmental Center. It's in Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. And Smith Group designed it. It's a very cool looking building. It's very very. I don't want to say weird. That sounds bad, but it's a very cool looking building. It just opened, and it's going for Living Building Challenge. And in a year from now, when they hand in the data, we'll know for sure how it pans out. But they're really beautiful. One of my other favorites is Hawaii Preparatory Academy. It's got this amazing roof that also becomes kind of the floor, and the whole thing is just angled towards the sun, and it looks like a giant sun catcher. and it generates just a ton of its own energy, and it recycles its own water. There's one in Rhinebeck, New York, called the Omega Center. It is a wastewater treatment plant, but all in a very sustainable way. And there are people that do yoga, and they have this yoga classroom. So they're doing yoga just 3 feet away from where there's like sewage being treated and recycled, because it's a healthy building. And they're very beautiful, innovative buildings. They're buildings that I think would win design awards even if they weren't green, but they also happen to be the most kind of cutting edge, innovative buildings you've ever seen.
And obviously, different architects are designing these buildings.
Yeah.
So, how does it work? Does the architect become aware of the Living Building Challenge and propose it to the client, or does the client somehow? Because obviously, and that's part of I think your job there, which we'll get into in a minute, is raising awareness of the Living Building Challenge.
Yeah, typically what happens is we have both, but typically what happens is the architect brings it up and introduces this idea. It takes a client that's open to being green. The client will come in and say, well, yeah, we've been looking at LEED Platinum, and they might even say, is there anything better?
Right.
Anything else? And they'll say, yeah, well, if you want a truly regenerative building, there's Living Building Challenge. The funny thing is, everyone you show it to, they get excited about it. The concept of where do buildings need to be in order to truly be sustainable? Where do they need to go? And Living Building Challenge is the only one answering that question. That's in it itself, that's exciting. People love it when they hear about it. The trouble is that I think people think that it's only for expensive buildings. And the truth is that it's not. We now have buildings of all sizes, all budgets. We just released an affordable housing framework, so affordable housing developers can use Living Building Challenge too. So I think it's normal for people to think that it's only for high-end boutique buildings, but in truth, we've had all types of buildings all over the world. So, I encourage everybody to go to the website, download the standard for free. You can just look at the checklist and go through it, and you'll see it makes a lot of sense.
That is cool, yeah. And in the show notes too, put in those couple of projects you mentioned too, the wastewater one, the Hawaii one, so we can check those out. All right, so Living Building Challenge needs to sort of reach out to, I guess, architects for awareness, and through the architects can bring that to the client, and then the client can, choose whether they want to do that or not. So we know the International Living Future Institute, which nobody knows, but everybody knows, or people know it as the Living Building Challenge is really how people are finding out about it. We know they're doing cool stuff, sustainable stuff. And I learned, even more than I knew before just talking to you now. How did you go to, not having a real job for 13 or 17 years to deciding 18 years to hey, this sounds like a good opportunity. I want to jump on board.
Well, for the last 18 years, I mean, I've had my own firm, right? 19 years. I've had my own firm. So it's not that I haven't been, I mean, I haven't had a job. I've worked for myself, but it's not like I've been sitting home doing nothing. But over the last 20, 25 years, in general, I've always been involved with nonprofits. Over the last 19 years, I've started, I've helped start 4 on my own. And, and by start, I mean, a bunch of people in the room together, file for a 501c3 and raise money and all that stuff. So I've been dancing in the nonprofit world for a while, and I was already friends with these guys. I've been friends with them from the start. So the way it began was
and you also, another thing you do is you go around the country and speak about green building, green topics,
right,
to corporations. I mean, that was one of your main gigs too. So educating.
Remember, I speak at 50 to 70 events a year, more than one a week sometimes, right? So I was already talking about them, and I was already mentioning them to everybody, and because to me it was the most exciting thing going on in the profession right now. If you're a green architect, Living Building Challenge is the stuff, man. That's where the good stuff is. It's LEED is boring. I mean, we've all worked on LEED buildings. Who cares? It's great, but the stuff I was excited about personally, that got my motor running, was Living Building Challenge, living regenerative building. So I was already talking about it in all my lectures. In fact, I would close on it and give them a call to action, like go to the website. And I wasn't even, more than just friends with them. Then every year they do a big annual conference called Living Future. And so in 2014, this past year, they asked me to be the MC because sometimes I'm funny, right? So I was their MC this year, and it was a lot of fun. But that started the conversation because I said, God, I'd love to do something more formal with you. And, I've started all these nonprofits and I've worked with nonprofits, and I wanted, I'd love to just do something. And so from it came this new position that they'd never had before. And my official title is VP of Global Outreach, which is, it's sufficiently evocative and sufficiently vague to not really explain what I do.
It sounds important.
But what the real thing of what I do is I get everybody to row the boat in the same direction. I think that's probably the easiest way to explain it, right? Whether it's the staff, whether it's our network of hundreds of ambassadors in 18 countries, or whether it's architects that have never heard of it before, I'm getting them all to kind of see it the same way and apply it to their projects.
And you relocated to Portland for this.
Yeah, so we have half the staff is in Seattle, half the staff is in Portland. We're up to 32 now, and we're hiring more actually. And so we have this 50-50 split between Portland and Seattle, and then we have one in Vancouver. And then so they said, we really need you in Portland. And I've been wanting to move to Portland for years, and so we did. We packed up and moved. I'm in Portland right now. I don't know if you can tell by this is actually a sunny day in Portland, but
you get a little Terminator face going on, like one side is all white. And so you started right at the beginning of September.
Yeah, it went very quickly. So at the end of May was the Living Future conference, and then we had conversations over the summer, and then in August that was it. And so the end of August I moved up to Portland and started the job right away. And so it's still pretty new.
Has it been what you expected, before you took the job?
In one sense, it's exactly what I expected because I knew them all so well. It was a very easy job to step into because I already had relationships with a lot of the staff.
Right.
I already knew them all by name. So starting up, I didn't have to learn anybody's name, for instance, right? And I also understood the mission very well because I've been out there promoting it anyway. I knew what the obstacles were. I knew what the image perception was. I knew what people understood about Living Building Challenge. I knew the players who were working on Living Building Challenge projects already. So it made a lot of sense, obviously, for me to take this. But in the other sense, it's also not what I expected because it's amazing. In a typical day, I'm talking to project teams in Australia and Ireland and we have one in Sweden, starting up now, and they have projects in India. We're working with I can't say the name, but it's an internet search engine that you all use. That's probably the easiest way that I can say it, right? And then so we have amazing
Netscape.
Teams of clients.
Is it Netscape?
Yes, it's Mozilla. No, it's
So by talking about these teams you're working with, does that mean you're talking to sort of the architect and the designers on those projects, and you're explaining how they can fulfill the requirements of Living Building Challenge? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, if they're already working on a Living Building Challenge project, then they already have staff assigned to them that are helping them through the process. I'm much more on the front end. I'm more kind of selling them on the idea of doing it. And remember, we don't just have Living Building Challenge. We also have Living Community Challenge, which is our site planning tool. We have 7 pilots underway. One of them is in New Orleans. It's the Holy Cross Center in New Orleans. So that's pretty cool. But then we also have the Living Product Challenge. So we have a series of these challenges that are now available. And the Living Product Challenge is brand new. In fact, it officially launches in April. But essentially, it does for products what Living Building Challenge does for buildings. It calls for living regenerative products. And so we're working with this kind of curated group of manufacturers now to do that, and we'll launch it in April at the Living Future Conference. And are these manufacturers, they're interested in this idea? Yeah, they're manufacturers who are already pretty innovative anyway,
right?
And already doing very cool things. But some of them, like one is a carpet manufacturer, one is a waterproofing manufacturer. It's not like they're like creating gold-plated baubles. I mean, they're creating everyday products that we all need and use.
And they just want to do it better, and they want to be more sustainable. And I think, like anything else, they know, or they're realizing that just because the way something has always been done doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way or the right way.
No, but there's also very pragmatic reasons to do it too, especially with products. If you look at what Europe has been doing in terms of regulating toxins and emissions and packaging, they know that really they either do it now or they do it later, and better to do it now ahead of the curve and lead the discussion,
right,
than kind of be scrambling to follow and play catch up.
Right.
So that's really their mentality, is that they would rather be part of helping shape this future rather than just waiting for it to happen.
Right. And I would imagine most companies probably realize that they're going to have to change at some point. And like you said, they could either do it now and sort of embrace it, or do it later. And if they do it later, now they're behind the eight ball and everybody else has done it. And it's a whole thing.
Yeah. So why wouldn't they? There's no, usually takes, it's usually a VP level. So it's pretty high up in the company that gets excited, and then he or she sells the vision to the CEO and then down to the staff. But that's really their thinking. I keep hearing the same terms from them. We'd rather be leading the conversation than waiting to see what's imposed on us.
So are you the guy, like, if I'm thinking like, oh, I'm a client, architect mentions the Living Building Challenge, I'm like, I don't know, if I want to talk to somebody at the Institute, are they the guy are they going to give me you to sell me on why I should do it?
I'd be a great person for you to talk to about it, for sure. But I'd like to think that all the staff are capable of doing that. We're actually training them to make them better at it. That's one of the things I'm doing, is I'm getting them to be better at talking about it. To me, they are our first round of ambassadors. So
how many?
If the staff can't talk about it, then we're in trouble.
Exactly. Yeah. How many architects do you have there? Do you know?
Architects are like normal people.
Architects, forget normal people.
We have, I think more than half the staff are actual architects.
Are they really?
And then we have, because we're a nonprofit, we have more nonprofit management type people too.
Right. Oh, I didn't realize you had that many architects.
But we actually like to hire architects. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, obviously.
Right.
So our executive director Amanda is an architect. Our founder Jason is an architect. A lot of the staff are architects. Yeah, but it kind of makes sense. I'd like to think that they're architects with better social skills. That's kind of how I think about it.
Right. Exactly.
They're not the typical black glasses, sit in a corner and doodle kind of guys. They're pretty outgoing.
Cool. And what's exciting for 2015? For Living Building Challenge.
Well, a lot. So let's see. At the end of January, we have our Net Positive conference in San Francisco, which you're all welcome to come to. It's our deep dive into energy and water, like how to build, net positive energy and water systems for your buildings.
When is that again?
That's January 21st.
Okay. Oh, I just lost you on that. Say the dates again.
January 21st and 22nd.
Okay.
And then, and you can get information on the website. We'll have it in the show notes. And then our big conference is the Living Future Conference. That's at the beginning of April 1st. And it was always my favorite conference to attend. It was always of the 70 that I spoke at, it was always my favorite one to go to, just because it's at such a high level. The caliber of the attendees, the caliber of the speakers. But also just the experience. It feels very much like a very welcoming love-in. It was the one that I left inspired and recharged from. So
right.
So now I get to help produce it. So that's kind of fun.
That'll be cool. So that's in May.
April.
And where is that?
That one's in Seattle.
Is that always in Seattle?
No, we move it around a bit. And next year we're talking about doing it somewhere totally new. But this year it's in Seattle, and then. And we'll release the Living Product Challenge there,
right,
officially to the world so they can see it. And then in September, at the end of September, the Living Product Challenge has its own event, which will be in Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that'll be fun too.
Yeah, so you're really working these days.
Oh yeah, it's a job and it's work. I have to like show up and wear pants and everything. So yeah.
Are you working more than 40 hours?
Oh yeah, yeah, totally.
Okay, but not crazy.
No, it's not. It's not insane. I get excited about it. We all do. I mean, we're as I tell the staff, I mean, you're literally saving the planet. I mean, you're working to save the world. So it's it's hard to get them. They're excited. We're all excited.
Well, that's very cool.
It's not like your typical, hey, crank out these bathroom elevations by 5. It's none of that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like, I mean, you're really solving problems, and that's exciting. I mean, that's a challenge, and I imagine it feels good.
Yeah, it's there's still a lot to do. There's a lot to do between feeling good and like.
I just like to solve it and be done with it, and just kick back and
sure. I'll tell you a little story. So, we put on these conferences, right? And so people submit speaking proposals because they want to submit to speak.
Right.
But unfortunately we can't accept all of them because we received like 200 speaking submissions for 65 slots or something. So obviously we're rejecting at least 2/3 of them. So as a person who speaks a lot, I know what it's like to be rejected. I know how it feels. So when we sent out the rejections, I added a personal note to each one because I know most of these people personally.
Right.
And, I was able to kind of say something to each one. And, it didn't take that long, just, but if you're rejecting hundreds of submissions, which is like, and there's several people in each submission, it's like, 350 people that I had to reject. And it's hard, it's not good to reject people. So instead I put this little personal note, sorry, I really liked your session, or, I'm hoping you're going to come anyway. That's part of my job, is like doing these little things that just make people feel more involved with the Institute. So it's hard to explain to people what I do every day, other than kind of making people feel special and making them feel connected to the mission.
Do you give hugs?
I do.
Well, you are in Portland now, right?
I would give smacks on the butt, but apparently that's sexual harassment now. I'm told I'm not allowed to.
All righty. Well, I think a lot of good stuff today. I actually learned more about what you do up there in Portland. So thank you.
And then we'll have links to everything too. I'd love for all the listeners to come to the events and let me know if you do, so I can introduce you to people, or at the very least join our mailing list. I mean, geez, that's easy. And then you can find out about all this stuff, and it's free. So why not?
And it sounds like we're going to continue to hear more about the Living Building Challenge over the next few years as it just grows in popularity and people take notice.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Especially now that we've reached kind of the tipping point, 235 buildings. That's right when LEED really started to take off, was when it reached about 200. So we're kind of at the same spot. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us as a special guest and also as the co-host. And I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the ARE Podcast. Be sure to visit architectexamprep.com and check out our other podcast episodes, video tips, and the ARE blog. Remember to